The wind howled through the gulch like a starving coyote, lifting dry dust into the air and casting long shadows across the barren Arizona landscape. The cottonwood tree, dead and split down the middle by an old lightning strike, groaned in the breeze like it still remembered the fire. Beneath it, tied hand and foot with worn leather straps, lay Jedediah Carter, rancher, widower, and the last man on a piece of land nobody wanted until men started dying over it. Blood dried stiff on his cheek. A cut above his right brow stung with every blink. His Stetson was gone. So was his Winchester. They'd taken those first, along with the silver coin his son had given him the day before he died. That coin, he'd kept it close for 3 years, tucked into the breast pocket of his coat like a promise. Now it was gone too. The bastards hadn't even needed him alive. They'd only kept him breathing because Eli, slimy, squirrel-eyed Eli, recognized Jed's name and figured there might be more to squeeze out of him before dumping him in the river. Now they were off on the ridge behind him, fire crackling, voices cackling like coyotes at a kill. The scent of meat and grease rode the wind to where Jed lay on the dirt. He twisted against the restraints. The leather cut into his wrists, and pain flared up his arms. His shoulders ached from the awkward angle they'd left him in. His legs stretched forward like a puppet with its strings slack. Each breath came with effort, tight and slow. He didn't call out. He knew better. He'd seen what they did to the trapper who begged. No, he was waiting, trying to outlast whatever plan they thought they were hatching. A fly landed near the corner of his eye. He shook his head, but it returned, drawn to the blood. The sky turned gold behind the buttes as the sun lowered itself inch by inch. Shadows stretched across the ravine, touching the edge of the tree wit. Ere Jed waited like an offering. Then, movement. At first he thought it was one of the goats, small hooves clattering gently against the rocks. But the shape coming over the rise wasn't squat and horned. It was human. A girl. She moved with the grace of something used to silence, her step light, her eyes scanning, alert. She wore a faded blue skirt, hem frayed from years of wear, and a pale shawl drawn over her shoulders. Her skin was sun-warmed, her hands calloused from labor, and her hair hung in dark curls that danced on the wind. A walking stick in one hand, a short curved knife at her waist. Behind her trailed a half-dozen goats, their bells muted with cloth. She paused when she saw him, Jed, bound and bleeding beneath the tree. He blinked hard. "Don't," he croaked, voice little more than breath. She took a step closer, not yet committing. Her gaze darted to the ridgeline, then back to him. She said nothing, just studied his form, his boots, the torn shirt, the bruises. He could see her deciding. "They're up there," he rasped, nodding toward the smoke curling into the sky. "Eating. Waiting to see if I die slow." Still, she didn't speak. She stepped around the goats, reached out, and poked his restraints with the end of her stick. A test. Then she crouched beside him, eyes level with his. Her voice, when it came, was soft, dry. "Who tied you?" "3 men. One with a missing finger. One with a yellow bandana. One with teeth like broken glass." Her lips didn't move much, but something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, maybe, or calculation. He looked at her, really looked, through the grime and the haze of pain. "You gonna leave me here?" She didn't answer. Instead, she drew her knife, the curved blade gleaming dully in the twilight. For a second, Jed's heart kicked into his throat. But she didn't swing. She cut the strap at his ankles first. Quick, clean. Then the ones at his wrists. His arms collapsed uselessly in front of him. He groaned, the pain of circulation returning as sharp as a fresh wound. "Easy," she said, more command than comfort. He nodded. "You got a name?" She stood, tucking the knife back into her belt. "Mira." Jed tried to push himself up, but the dizziness hit him like a drunk punch. He stumbled forward and would have fallen flat if she hadn't caught his elbow. She wasn't strong, but she was steady. "I owe you." "No talking," she said. "Come." He followed her down the hill, legs like jelly, leaning more than walking. The goats trailed behind them like sentries. Every few steps, she paused and listened, head tilted, jaw clenched. Jed noted the way she moved, not like a girl, but like someone used to danger, used to walking on land that didn't forgive mistakes. They reached a small arroyo, half hidden by mesquite and long grass. Mira pointed to a cleft in the rock wall, just big enough for a man to crawl into. Jed dropped to his knees and inched inside, groaning as he went. It was dry, cool. The air smelled faintly of juniper. She handed him a canteen, and he drank greedily, water spilling down his chin. When he tried to speak again, she shook her head. "They'll hear you." Outside, her goats began to bleat softly, grazing along the rim. Mira crouched at the entrance of the cave, scanning the horizon. He watched her from the shadows. She looked young, no more than 18, but her eyes carried the weight of someone who'd buried people. When the sun dipped below the hills, she entered and lit a small fire from a bundle of mesquite twigs. It cast flickering light on the walls and revealed more of Jed's wounds. Her expression didn't change. "You fought?" "Tried." He chuckled, then winced. "Didn't end well." "You alone?" He nodded. "Had a ranch. Small. Out near the Dry Fork." "Why were you there?" Jed's voice lowered. "Because they burned my home. Took my family. I was tracking them." She looked up, sharp. "You followed those men?" "They were the same ones. I'd swear it. One had a nairns, ecklace, carved horn. My wife had one just like it." Silence grew thick between them. "I know them," she said finally. "They passed through our village 3 months ago. Took my brother. Said he'd stolen a horse." Jed closed his eyes. "I'm sorry." She said nothing, only began crushing herbs between her fingers. She smeared the paste on his wrists, the scent bitter and earthy. It stung, but the fire faded a little. "They're not from here," she said. "Drifters. Some were soldiers once. Some were worse." Jed's hands clenched. "How'd you learn to track like that?" "My father taught me, before he died." He looked at her, respect creeping in. "You've survived a lot. So have you." They sat in silence after that. The night stretched out around them, wind whispering through the dry grass, the distant yip of a coyote echoing across the hills. The fire crackled gently, warming the narrow space. Jed leaned back against the wall. "I thought I was done for." "You still might be," Mira said without cruelty. "They'll look for you at first light." He nodded grimly. "I'm not ready to die. You shouldn't have come alone." "There's no one else." She tilted her head. "Maybe now there is." He glanced at her. "You offering to help?" "I'm offering you one night. After that you're on your own." "Fair enough." Mira stood, brushing dust from her skirt. She moved to the mouth of the cave and looked out. Jed watched her silhouette framed by stars. A girl carved from resilience. "Why'd you stop for me?" he asked, voice low. She didn't turn. "Because you looked like you still had something to fight for." He swallowed hard. That coin, the one his son had given him. It wasn't the only thing stolen. But maybe not everything was lost yet. They rested uneasily, the fire flickering low. At some point in the night, Jed woke to find Mira asleep beside the wall, arms crossed. Knife, within reach. He studied her, the way her face softened in sleep, the lines of worry smoothing out. Then a sound, distant, carried on the wind. Hoofbeats. He sat up straight, and so did she. In seconds, they were both alert. Mira reached for her stick. Jed gripped the handle of his old Bowie knife. Voices drifted over the ridge, louder now, closer. Mira whispered, "They found your tracks." Jed looked at her. "Run?" "No. Hide." She whistled low. The goats stirred, bleated, began moving toward the sound. A decoy. Mira leaned in. "Stay silent. Don't leave until morning." He touched her wrist. "You'll be back." She didn't answer, just vanished into the darkness with her herd like a ghost. The hoofbeats grew louder, then distant again, then gone. Jed sat in the silence, heart pounding, every nerve stretched tight. He didn't know it yet, but this girl, this quiet, hard-eyed stranger, was about to change the course of his life. And his war wasn't over. Not yet. The first light of morning painted the canyon walls in bleeding hues of rust and gold. Jed Carter blinked awake in the cramped stone hollow, back aching from the rock floor. His muscles throbbed with every movement, and dried blood crusted along the edge of his shirt collar. But pain no longer concerned him, only survival. He leaned forward, listening. Nothing but the hush of wind scraping through sagebrush. The fire had long gone out. Mira had not returned. The air felt heavier now. He crawled to the cave's edge and scanned the horizon. No sign of her, no hoofprints, no shadowy silhouette descending through the brush. Part of him thought she'd run off, left him like so many others had in the past. But something in her eyes, clear, deliberate, hadn't been born from fear. She was a girl who knew what she was doing. He eased out from the cave, wincing as his knees hit stone. The sun crept higher. The wound in his side burned with movement. He needed water, cover, and some sense of direction before those men caught his scent again. A twig snapped. He froze. Then came her voice, hushed but urgent. "Stay down." Mira emerged from behind a split rock, crouched low, her shawl tucked into her belt. A gash ran along her right cheek, half-dried, crusted with dirt. Jed opened his mouth to speak, but she was already signaling him to move. She motioned toward the slope, narrow, hidden, rimmed by brush and boulders. He followed, without question. They descended in silence. The air grew cooler as the trees thickened, shielding them in broken shadow. Mira moved like an animal in its element, quick, instinctive. Jed stumbled once, catching himself on a branch. She didn't pause to help. Only once they reached a creek bed, shallow, mostly dry, did she finally stop. "They're close," she said. "They found where we hid." "How many?" "2 I saw. Third might be circling." Jed bent at the stream, cupped water to his mouth. Mira crouched nearby, rubbing dust into her hands. "They followed goat tracks part of the way," she said. "But they're not stupid. They'll look low next, toward the river trail." Jed wiped his mouth. "We need to move west toward the ridge." She studied him. "Why?" "I had a hideout there, before, years back. Old trapper's shack near Bear Skull Bluff. If it's still standing, we can hold out, or regroup." "You can walk that far?" He stood, testing his legs. They wobbled but held. "I can if you lead." She nodded once. They moved again, pushing westward, deeper into the folds of the canyon. Hours passed without a word. The only sounds were the rhythmic crunch of their boots, the distant croak of crows overhead, and the wind hissing through juniper. Jed began to watch her differently now, not just as a girl who'd freed him, but as someone with purpose. She scanned the trail behind them constantly, listening to the language of nature, like it spoke in full sentences. She walked with her left shoulder slightly forward, always keeping her knife hand free. At all.
Nay, point. She raised a hand suddenly and froze mid-step. Jed did the same, trusting her instincts. From the trees above came the sound of shifting branches, then silence. A deer, maybe, or something worse. Mira waited a full minute before moving again. By midday they reached a narrow stretch of canyon wall where red cliffs loomed on both sides, a natural choke point. Jed's eyes darted along the ridges. He stopped. "Wait." Mira turned. "What is it?" He pointed. "There, see that?" A shallow groove in the earth. Recent, boot heel, large, maybe 2 hours old. "They're ahead of us," he whispered. Mira clenched her jaw. "We go higher." She scrambled up a rocky incline to the left, her body moving with precision. Jed followed, though each step sent needles of fire through his calves. At the top, they reached a flat outcrop overlooking the canyon floor. Below, 3 riders moved slowly, horses kicking up thin plumes of dust. One of them wore a yellow bandana, another had no index finger on his right hand. Jed tensed. "That's them. They're searching wide." Jed's grip tightened on the handle of his knife. "They won't stop. Not until I'm dead." Mira didn't look at him. "Then we keep moving." They skirted along the cliffside for another hour before descending back into a stand of pinyon. Mira slowed near a fallen log and dropped to a knee, studying something. "What is it?" Jed asked. "Cougar scat. Fresh." He glanced around. "Wonderful. They hunt at dusk. We've got time. Maybe." Jed exhaled sharply. "What does maybe mean?" She didn't answer, but her eyes swept the branches above. They reached the shack just as the sun touched the edge of the world. It leaned drunkenly against a cluster of boulders, the roof patched with strips of tin and cedar bark. Jed pushed open the door, half expecting the place to collapse. Inside it smelled like dust and old pine. A rusted stove stood in the corner. A cot with broken legs leaned against the wall. It was small, but it would serve. Mira stepped in behind him, checked the corners, then lit a stew of candle from her satchel. The flickering light cast shadows on the warped walls. "I built this with my brother," Jed said quietly. "Back when we used to trap during the lean months, we'd stay out here, skin beavers, hunt rabbits." Mira nodded. "It'll work." Jed sank onto the cot. His legs trembled beneath him. She unwrapped a cloth bundle and handed him a strip of dried meat. He chewed slowly, mouth dry. The flavor barely registered, but it steadied his stomach. "You've been tracking them too," he said after a while. "Yes. Why?" "They killed my brother. Said he stole from them. He didn't." Jed stared at the floor. "How old was he?" 14. He closed his eyes. "I'm sorry." She didn't respond. He sat in silence, listening to the fire crackle in the stove. Then he said, "You could have run. Left me back there. But you didn't. You look like someone who wasn't finished." He smiled faintly. "You always talk like that. Only when it matters." He chuckled. "You got away with silence, Mira. That's rare." She reached into her shawl and pulled out a folded cloth. From it, she removed a silver coin. Worn, scratched, familiar. Jed froze. "My brother had this," she said softly. "Said a dying man dropped it before they rode off." His throat tightened. "That was mine. My son gave it to me the day before they died. I thought it might be." She handed it to him. He turned it over in his palm as if afraid it would vanish. "Thank you. They took a lot," she said. "But not everything." Outside, the wind shifted. A low rumble echoed through the hills. Thunder. Jed stood, listening. "No storm's supposed to come," he muttered. Mira moved to the doorway, scanned the sky.
That's not thunder. Stampede? No. Hoofbeats. Many. He grabbed the rifle Mira had taken from one of the saddlebags earlier. It was old, scratched, but functional. Mira handed him a pouch of bullets. "They found the goats," she said. "They'll know you helped me." She nodded. Jed loaded the rifle with steady hands. "We'll hold them off here." "There's too many. We make them think there's more of us. Set noise traps, bottles, tin cans, flash powder if we can make it. They'll burn this place down." He smiled grimly. "Then we bury them in the ashes." She didn't argue. Instead, they moved together, placing old glass along the ridge, stringing noise lines with bits of wire and scrap metal, stuffing broken wood into the chimney to funnel smoke low and wide. They worked quickly, silently. As the moon rose, casting pale light across the land, Jed looked at her and said, "We might die tomorrow." She met his gaze. "Then we make it costly." He nodded. When they returned inside, the night was heavy. Jed sat by the fire, coin in hand. Mira watched from the other side of the room, leaning against the wall, eyes half closed. "You know," he said, "if I make it out of this, I'll rebuild the ranch." She raised an eyebrow. "I'll need help. Someone who knows the land. Someone like you." She looked down. "I have my goats. Bring them." She didn't answer. Then from the distance came a high whistle, rising, sharp, familiar. Jed's blood went cold. "That's Eli." Mira stood. "They're marking the trail." Jed rose, rifle in hand. "Then dawn's the time." They looked at each other, neither speaking. A bond had formed, not from words, not from shared hopes or grand gestures, but from silence, grit, and fire. As the wind moaned through the trees and the candle sputtered low, they both knew something had shifted. Tomorrow would bring blood. But tonight, they were not alone. The wind had changed direction. Jed Carter stood just outside the shack with his boots planted deep in the hard-packed earth, the barrel of his rifle resting across his forearm. The sky was the color of bruised copper, and the last whisper of night clung to the trees. Morning was near, but the sun hadn't yet broken the horizon. A stillness had settled over the land. Not peace, but the breath held before a storm. Behind him, Mira moved like a shadow, her hands busy at the stove, stoking the fire low enough not to draw attention, but high enough to ignite the oil-soaked rags she'd stuffed into the corners of the broken walls. The traps had all been laid. They'd stacked a false wall of wood against the cabin's weak side, baited it with old boots and clothes. With any luck, the bandits would think they were sleeping inside and make their first move blind. Jed's fingers grazed the edge of the silver coin in his pocket. He closed his hand around it, tight. His son's voice echoed faintly in his head. "You keep this, Pa, so you come home safe." "I never figured this was how it'd end," he muttered. Mira didn't turn around. "It's not the end." "You sound awful sure." "I have to be." He studied her as she crouched to retrieve her knife and belt from the floor. Dirt smeared her face. The cut on her cheek had scabbed, brown and angry. Yet in her eyes there was no fear, just calm, iron-hard resolve. She didn't ask for promises or offer hope. She moved with quiet intention, the way someone does when they've seen too much and still choose to keep going. Jed turned back to the tree line. Nothing yet? Just the faint rustle of wind weaving through pines. Then, a sound. Distant hooves. Sharp. Rhythmic. "They're here," he said. Mira stood. "They'll send one ahead." Jed crouched behind the old water trough, motioned her to take the high ground, an outcrop 10 yards up the slope. She moved without hesitation, crouching low, rifle slung over her shoulder, knife at her hip. Minutes passed like hours. Then came the rider. Eli. Same yellow bandana, Same smug face. His horse picked its way through the dry brush with uneasy steps. Eli scanned the shack, rifle ready in one hand, reins loose in the other. Behind him, no less than 6 men fanned out, all armed, their coats flapping like crow wings in the wind. Jed could smell the whiskey on the air. "They got numbers," Jed whispered. Mira didn't answer. Her eyes narrowed. Eli drew closer, called out loud like it was a joke. "Jed Carter, you dead yet?" No response, only the creak of saddle leather and the thud of boots as 2 of the men dismounted. "Maybe he ran off," said one. "Left a trail of piss behind him." Eli laughed, then dismounted and walked straight toward the shack. "Or maybe he's just waiting in there, all noble and doomed." His boot kicked a tin can. It clanged, then went still. Jed waited, breath caught. Eli stepped onto the porch, turned toward the men. "Check the back." 2 men nodded and moved around the shack's edge. Jed raised his rifle. Mira's voice cut the silence. "Don't." He looked up. She pointed. 2 more shapes on the hill behind them. Flankers. If he fired now, they'd be surrounded. Wait. Inside the shack, the oil rags began to hiss. Eli stepped through the door. The blast came a second later. A whoosh of fire and light exploded through the front of the cabin, the roar shattering the quiet morning. Smoke billowed upward, black and thick. Eli flew backward into the dirt, rolling, screaming. Flames clung to his coat. One of his men rushed forward, but Jed fired. 1 shot, clean. The man dropped. Gunfire erupted. The men behind the shack panicked, firing blindly into the smoke. Mira took one down from the hill with a single, precise shot. Jed rolled behind the sir. Etrofa's bullets bit into the wood. Then silence. Jed peeked around the corner. 2 men lay dead. Eli writhed in the dirt, still alive, half burned. The others had scattered to cover. One darted up the ridge. Mira met him with a knife in the gut, then disappeared into the brush. Jed moved like an animal now, low and fast. He found the man reloading behind the woodpile and buried his boot into his chest. They tumbled, fists flying. The man swung a knife, cut Jed's shoulder deep. Blood poured down his arm. Jed headbutted him, felt bone crunch. He grabbed the knife and drove it through the bandit's chest. The body jerked once, then stilled. More shots, screams. Then, nothing. Jed stood amid the smoke, breathing like a bull, vision blurred from sweat and blood. Mira emerged from the trees, limping, her skirt torn at the thigh. They stared at each other across the battlefield. She nodded. It was over. Eli crawled, gasping. Jed walked over, rifle lowered. The man's face was a ruin, burned, blistered, barely human. "You killed my family," Jed said. Eli wheezed. "I didn't mean to. Wasn't supposed to go like that." Jed lowered himself slowly, knee pressing into the dirt. "You came to my land, burned it down, laughed over their bodies." Eli's eyes widened. "Don't." Jed stared a moment longer, then stood. "Rot here," he said. He walked away. Mira helped him onto a boulder. She wrapped his arm with part of her shawl, tight enough to stop the bleeding. "You didn't kill him," she said. "No. You should have." Jed looked out at the bodies, the smoke curling against the sky. "Maybe." She didn't press. They buried the fallen in shallow graves, marking none of them. The earth swallowed them without protest. When they finished, the sun had climbed high, casting clean light across the clearing. The shack smouldered behind them, just black wood and heat ghosts rising off the ruins. Jed stood quietly, the silver coin in his hand once more. "You could come back with me," he said. "Help me rebuild. That offer still stands." Mira didn't look at him. "My family's gone," he continued. "But I don't want to die alone out there. You're smart. You're strong.
You could help make something worth holding on to.
She took a long breath.
My goats are still out there, and this canyon's my home.
I could give you land. I don't need land.
Jed smiled, tired.
Then what do you need?
She finally looked at him. To know I can choose. And today, I choose to walk my own way.
He nodded, though the words cut deeper than the blade had. They packed what little remained, some dried meat, a coil of rope, a spare knife Mira tucked into her boot. Jed saddled one of the bandits' horses. Mira declined his offer to ride. At the fork in the canyon, she stopped. The wind blew strands of hair across her cheek. You're going to be all right, Jed Carter. I don't know if that's true. You'll learn to be. They stood there a long moment. Then, without another word, she turned and walked into the trees. Her form disappeared between the shadows, swallowed by the land that had raised her. Jed watched until she was gone. The ranch was waiting, half ashes, half bones, but he'd go back. Nail by nail, board by board. He'd rebuild the barn, plant something that might live longer than he did. Maybe next spring she'd graze her goats near the fence line. Maybe she wouldn't. But he'd wave. And maybe she'd wave back. Months passed. The house took shape under his hands. Not what it was, but something new. Stronger. Simpler. He kept the silver coin above the hearth. Every now and then, a girl with dark hair and steady hands passed along the ridge. She never stopped, but she always looked. He never forgot the silence they shared, the trust built with no words, the fire, the pain, the bond. Sometimes the strongest allies are the ones who never ask to be saved, only seen. And sometimes the greatest journeys don't end with victory, but with the simple act of surviving what should have killed you. If this story moved you, if you've ever had to rebuild your life from ruin or found strength in someone unexpected, share your thoughts below, leave a comment, like this video, subscribe for more stories like this one. And remember, even in the loneliest places, even when the fire dies down, there's always someone out there with a knife in hand and hope in their heart, willing to cut the ropes and lead you home.